Especially would like to welcome Diarmuid Cole to talk about intubation. We're very sorry that we couldn't have the Minister, but we have just as good. We have his right-hand man who will be working beside him on the integration policy over the next number of years. I thought the films were fascinating, especially the last one with the education for the children, the Polish children. It's something that we couldn't have conceived of, maybe a few years ago at least, and maybe even this time last year. It just shows how much things are happening, things are changing, and it's making our society all the richer for it. Now, of course, there will always be problems, and the way problems are best sorted out, I think, is on person-to-person basis, which is why the society has been in existence, and we believe that we still have a role in being a bridge between Irish and Poles. And policies are wonderful and we need policies, but we will always need communication, and we will always need nights like we have tonight. So again, welcome to Diarmuid, and I give you the floor.
Thanks very much, Paddy, and can I begin by apologising on behalf of the Minister for the fact that he couldn't be here. He had been looking forward to being present, and unfortunately he's elsewhere. Can I also congratulate the makers of the film for giving a view of my country, and perhaps notable in the piece in Hollywood was the absence of people, which is not necessarily the case elsewhere. And of course, typically in Ireland, we have two Hollywoods. We have one just outside Belfast and one just outside Dublin. That's just to confuse people. Anyway, to turn to our theme for tonight, which is integration working? And in one sense, I would say yes, and in another sense, I would say no. The reason I say yes is that there has been, as the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development has called it today, a remarkable amount of migration to Ireland, remarkable in worldwide terms, over the last 5 to 6 years. Ireland currently, according to the census figures of 2006, 10% of the Irish population, or people living in Ireland, were not born in Ireland. That compares the situation in the United States, or the United Kingdom, or in France, where that number is about 3% of the population. And I think it is a remarkable tribute to both the people who were here before the new arrivals and the new arrivals, that scale of change has taken place without the very obvious social disharmony that can be have seen elsewhere in other countries. Just on figures, the number of EU citizens from the so-called EU 10, that's the 10 accession countries, it's around 120,000 people according to the census, and that is 29% of the total of non-Irish nationals here. And the remaining numbers, 27% are from the UK, 10% from the rest of the EU 25, 8% from Africa, 11% from Asia, and 5% from America. The number of Polish people, I'm sure you'll be surprised to hear, is the second largest category, the UK being the first. The theme is integration working. It's very difficult to measure that. And the reason I said yes and no is that we've had this very large increase, and there hasn't been any huge social unrest, or indeed any to speak of. However, we are still, as a government, about to change all our structures as to how we deal with people who have come here and how we manage the challenges of integration. And the first step in that, I think, was the appointment of the Minister after the last election. And that represented a recognition by government that the situation had changed and that government structures and arrangements would have to change and adapt to deal with that situation. There are various measures that people use to measure integration. There's a paper by Bishop Dept, who's from Brooklyn, New York, and he has studied integration issues very closely in the United States, and he acted as an advisor to Peter Sutherland when they were sitting on a UN group on migration. And some of the things he came up with were labour force participation, language acquisition, naturalisations, education, marriage, and so on. So those are some of the issues you can use. For most of the people who've come to Ireland in recent years, they are young, well qualified, and have found work. Over 80% are in employment. Problem is that unemployment may not be commensurate with qualifications. So people are working in jobs for which they're overqualified. In relation to the Polish population, 21% working in manufacturing, 19% in building construction, 15% in service industries, 10% in sales and commerce, 6% in communication and transport, and 4% in professional, technical and health areas. So that would seem to us to indicate that people are definitely working in jobs for which they're overqualified. One of the issues is that we don't have a very clear idea of how many people are going to stay and how many people are going to move on. A lot of people have said in various surveys done locally that people have come here for work or to improve their English and they intend to go back home again. That experience will be very similar to that of Irish people when they went abroad. When they went abroad, you can still meet them abroad. They intended to go to London for 2 years, then they stayed 3, then they met someone, they got married, had kids started going to school, and there they are 40 years later. Still intending to come home, but realistically that won't happen. So there's no reason to expect that a similar type of kind of milestone events won't occur with the migration that has taken place to this country. The Polish networks that have been built up, and this society is an example. Newspapers, information websites, schools, as we've seen, are all very supportive. The research that been carried out in 2006 said that language, employment rights and protection, and need for more information were the major issues facing the Polish people here. On language, we will have a report from consultants in the summer about provision of English language teaching and how best to advance that. It's particularly difficult in the primary and post-primary sector. It's possible to employ teachers to teach children in school. The number of language support teachers has gone from about 260 in 2001 to about 1,950 today, which is a pretty phenomenal increase. But if it's the adult group that we're not quite sure how best to move on, because I don't think many of us, well certainly at my age, would fancy the idea of having to go to night classes and take out my English grammar book and start to learn English after having done a day's work. So we have to try to see what is the best approach on that. On employment rights and protection, certainly there have been problems, not perhaps so much with the Polish community, but certainly with other communities. So the establishment of the National Employment Rights Agency and the increase in the number of inspectors hopefully will help to end the exploitation of workers. But I still keep hearing stories of people who don't have contracts of employment, who are still allegedly on emergency tax rates, and that's an area that will have to be tackled. We will be approaching the community information centres to see if they can step up their efforts, because they are a countrywide network of offices who advise people of their rights. We are still at an early stage in developing our policies. When I say that, however, we will be publishing within the next few weeks a strategy statement as to how we are going to seek to advance integration. The Minister has already announced that there will be a Ministerial Council on Immigration, which he will himself chair, to hear directly from people from the community as to the issues as they see them on the ground. the number of people in that will be between 25 and 40. We're still not absolutely certain. And we will try to achieve a geographic balance, both as where people come from and within Ireland itself, and also obviously a gender balance. The other second group then will be an expert commission on migration, and the members of that will be about 7 to 9, and they will come from the academia, the economists, lawyers, and people from social policy areas. And their job will be to commission research, evaluate research, with a view to ensuring that accurate information is made public, because there is not a very large amount compared to other countries, but there is a lot of debate that takes place that is based on, this will have to be translated, Dúirt ban lum de Dúirt ban lei. I mean, a woman told me that someone said something to her, and suddenly that becomes a fact that this happened. And you get, that's an Irish expression, by the way.
Dużo informacji jest przekazywanych pocztą pantoflową i to urasta do prawdziwych faktów po prostu. Chyba tak można to przetłumaczyć.
So the intention behind that commission is that it would put accurate information into the public domain, and that would both help in informing policy formulation and also public debate, which can be sometimes difficult. One of the issues, and I refer briefly back to the figures I gave, is that the migrant community generally is not participating in what I would call entrepreneurial or business activities. And we will be establishing a task force to look at the participation of the migrant community in the cultural, civic, and the entrepreneurial life in this country, and how that can best be encouraged. Most people do participate in aspects of Irish life, be it the civic life, cultural life, or sporting life. So we will be establishing or giving financial support to the major sporting organisations to encourage them to adopt and implement plans to integrate migrants at that level. And we're talking here about soccer, sorry, I suppose I should say to a Polish audience, football, in the Gaelic Athletic Association, the Basketball Association, and in athletics. And I say the idea behind that is to encourage people to become involved. There will also be some funding for other areas, again with the same objective of encouraging migration. There will be funding for projects somewhat similar to the projects of last year, but the funding will be directed through the local authorities. Because our major policy approach is that integration really has to take place at a local level. People who deal with the local authorities on a daily basis, that should become the focal point. And funding and so on should come from mainstream funding rather than some separate agency, because otherwise you run the risk of developing what I might call a parallel community with a parallel structure and a parallel system in which everybody feels different and nobody feels they all come from the same problems. On health, the much criticised, I suppose, Health Service Executive have published their strategy for how to cope with the demands made on them, and they are now working on an implementation plan for that. One issue that I mentioned is the overqualification of people for jobs. The National Qualifications Authority is there, and they have the job of working out an equivalence in qualifications. It's still, I think, in its infancy and needs further development. attitude of what I might call civic society, and including participation in, for a civil servant, a very difficult word, politics, and involvement of the migrant community in politics at a local level is something that really has to be encouraged and developed, because that is how the migrant community will be able to express its views on the political level. You will have votes in the local elections, and you will have votes in the European elections, and that is the way to get your voices heard, by becoming involved at that level, rather than remaining aloof and saying it's nothing to do with me, I'm not Irish. And can I just say, I'm sure I've probably spoken for too long, just one myth that is there is that somebody cannot join the Irish civil service if they aren't Irish. Well, that's not true. We don't have any nationality requirement for people who want to join the public service. And there will be a major information campaign starting in about September to get that message across, that you don't have to be Irish to work as an Irish civil servant. So, thank you very much. Just to answer your points, on the question of talking, I did say that we've accepted that the current structures don't work, and that's why we're coming up with a new one. And nobody can guarantee that that will work either, but it will be a group chaired by the Minister, whoever he or she may be, and none of us know what's going to happen in 3 weeks' time. So there will be that forum where people will be able to say things directly to the Minister. There will also be the Commission, which will do research and so on. On the question of sports, maybe I was just, I should have mentioned that we commissioned about 4 weeks ago a study which is costing a very large amount of money, designed specifically, and it's in conjunction with the Arts Council. You're on that
as well,
yeah.
Steering group, sorry,
yeah.
I'm everywhere.
Yeah, so I mean, we have actually, that participation is not being ignored.
I know.
It's just that the other bodies are that bit further on, in the sense that the sporting bodies have developed, by and large, plans what they can do, and the consultancy is designed to say what can we do to encourage the involvement of people from the migrant community in the arts. So we're not overlooking it, but we are. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on one-off funding, and there are good projects happening all over the country, and they are all coming to an end more or less together. They were clearly designed as one-off projects, although a number of people thought that they would be able to keep them going, but we don't have the funds for that. And that was why I said we were going to try to direct funding more through local authorities, and more on a 3 to 5 year basis, rather than on a 1 year basis, because there has to be more continuity. On the question of translation and interpretation, there is a study that with the national NCCRI have been given a sum of money to do some research on that, and to come up with proposals, I suppose. Currently on interpretation and translation, every state agency is doing their own approach to it, which is costing millions and probably not delivering a terribly effective service to anybody. So we have to look at models of improving that, because it's costing 2 million in the courts, 2 million in the guards, 4 or 5 million in the health service, and nobody is happy with the final outcome. So but that is, again, it is on the agenda, and we expect that report to be available in midsummer.
Thank you. Okay.
So, but just to respond to that, I think Ireland, rather like Poland, has been a country of both immigration and emigration. One of my daughters, for example, is now residing in London, having previously resided in Portugal. So these things happen. And what you were saying there about the experiences of migration, you would hear the same thing from Irish people in Canada, in the United States, or in Australia. It's how this society makes people feel welcome and feel at home and feel comfortable and able to get on with their lives and make their livings and achieve, as you said, their aspirations. And that's what we are trying to put in place. I said at the outset that the extent of migration to Ireland, in the terms of the Organisation for Economic Development, is remarkable by any international standards. and the pace of it, as you said, it has a dynamic of its own, and the Irish state has to react to that in a positive way. And as I said in my opening remarks, it is a tribute to all sides of this movement that we have not had some of the terrible tensions that have arisen in other parts of the world, where they have a much longer history of migration, either as former colonial powers or whatever. Ireland has not experienced that. And that's a very positive thing. And I think that reflects the positive attitudes on all sides. Yes, we have heard criticisms of the health system because of its failure to react and to specifically provide materials. However, and no doubt some of that is justified, and I have to put my hands up and say my other daughter is a primary school teacher in Donabate in North Dublin, so I'm kind of familiar enough from two levels with what's happening. At an operational level, the Department of Education has increased the number of teachers from 262 in the academic year to the end of, to July 2002 to over 1,900 today. Last year it was 1,400, so it's gone up by 500 in a year. The cost is something in the order of 120 million a year. So while we can be critical of the Department of Education and people can have their views about it, I don't believe it's fair to say that they have closed their eyes to this problem and have said, oh, we're not going to, it's going to go away. I would say far from that at the operational level. On the kind of more theoretical level, if we like, they have commissioned a study from the ESRI, which is titled Managing Diversity in a Second Level School, and that research is ongoing. The inspectorate in the Department of Education is also conducting a survey broadly on the same lines. They have produced various booklets. For example, on the Department of Education website, there's information in 6 different languages, including Polish, as to how to go about and how the system works. A DVD on the primary school curriculum has been produced for assessment for parents in English, Irish, French, Polish and Lithuanian. So the studies are ongoing. There has been a reaction on the ground to deal with the situation, and I don't believe the Department of Education itself would say that it's perfect, but it is a very big system. There are something, I think, about 40,000 teachers altogether, and they are responding. They have responded, and I don't believe that a lot of the criticism is justified. We had the situation because of the way in which the national school system operates, where the patrons tend to be from one religion or the other, and that causes difficulty. Now, some people seem to have an ideological problem with that role of the church in education. That they're entitled to have that issue if they wish. But the Department of Education has developed a new model in the 3 new schools where they'll be under the patronage of the state itself indirectly. And the Catholic Archbishop of Dublin has said that in 2 schools, 25% of the pupils, more or less, are to be non-Catholic to try to reflect the balance of the community out there. But there are issues, certainly, in parts of the city about educational provision. And there are issues about clustering. And there are issues about the make-up and the catchment areas for schools, which have to be addressed. There are some schools in West Dublin where there are 50 different nationalities attending it. And this has all happened, not as in a situation with a colonial power where they would have had movement from the colonies over the years. This has all happened in the last 4 to 5 years. So I can't give you a really, it's not, you might think that a very satisfactory answer, but that's the way it is. Just on participation by Polish people at 3rd level, in the year 2000, there were 13 Polish students in universities in Ireland. This year, or last year, that had risen to 128. Still not very many, but it's showing a continual increase.
Okay, Martin.
Chairman and Speaker, I'm one of the Irish members of the committee. The Irish Polish Society historically always has been a mixture of Irish and Polish people, because its origins were in the small number of Polish people who were here who mainly had Irish spouses, one way or the other. Now, since the session, we have huge numbers coming from what I call Eastern Europe. And I'm really speaking personally when I say this, though I'm on the committee. As we have here in Ireland an ageing population, where 2 out of every 7 at present are over 65, and need the workforce to provide pensions for them. And actuarials who do this work have shown me figures recently that by 2020, 3 out of every 7 Irish people will be over the age of 65. There's a huge advantage in this influx that's come in from what we used to call Eastern Europe, because they're not babies and they're not old age pensioners. They're all between, say, 20 and 35. So they're able to work and willing to work. And we have a declining birth rate, a 1.2 per family, and a declining workforce. Now, our country was so small, it was not really self-sufficient. We didn't have a big enough market to support ourselves. So the 600,000 approximately that come in 5 years, between refugees and new arrivals, are very welcome. And I feel we as a country have got to make them more welcome by encouraging them to integrate, because we actually need to persuade some of them, or encourage some of them, to stay here. Yes, we know that most of them want to come for 2 or 3 years and go back. Now, it's not entirely one way, because I personally am working in Poland as an architect for a client who is here, but I'm not there all the time, I'm back and forth. So there is exchange at different levels.
Yeah, if I could just react to that. I know that the economists make that argument, and I would accept there's a certain validity to it. But from an integration perspective, we have to take a somewhat broader view rather than a narrow economic one. Although, as I did say, one of the members at least of the expert commission on integration will have an economics background, because clearly that is an issue that has to be addressed for all of us. But from an integration perspective, we are trying to create a climate in which everybody, both members, the person themselves. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that we can't just look at people who come here as units of economic units who come here to work. People come here with aspirations to life, as was said earlier. They come here to have a better life. They come here to have a social life. They come here to perhaps improve their English, see a bit of Ireland, see a bit of the world, bring their families with them, and so on. And that's where we have to really get it right. And I agree with you that the more people that stay, the better for everybody, not just for the people who've come, but for everybody, both in the interest of diversity and every other possible reason.
Be interested in hearing from the floor just about people's experience, especially Polish people's experience of Ireland. You know, has it been easy or difficult to integrate? Have there been barriers set in the way? Anyone? Yeah.
My name is Alisa Bobek. I'm from the Department of Sociology in Trinity College, and I work with the research on Polish community in Ireland, and specifically looking at the higher skilled level Polish migrants. And what we are finding is basically that however people are integrating themselves on the labor market and are happy with the jobs and are happy with the positions that they are within the employment, there is a problem with the social integration in a way that even from here, what I'm hearing from Flora, from you, it's always about how to integrate the Polish people into Irish society. But integration works both ways.
Yeah.
So people feel that there is a wall coming from the Irish society. And the only thing that I can come up with is the notion of temporality. So if we are here temporarily, we're here as a temporary labor force, who wants to make friends? So nobody has conflicts, nobody has problems. But there is no like real friendships or something like that. You know what I mean? Because if somebody is a temporary, why would you make friends with them?
But that's why I've used the word diversity a couple of times. And that's why I said we want to more actively encourage people to become involved in mainstream sporting, arts, whatever, political, business, yeah, exactly, in those areas. Because if people come and remain within a workplace setting and don't move out and move into the business sector or become involved with large Irish organisations, that's how Irish people who travel, I mean, the people who would migrate within Ireland would express somewhat similar views. People from Cork and Kerry would say that they wouldn't be terribly welcome in parts of Dublin. And they probably wouldn't be, especially when football matches are on. But yeah, as I said, we have to talk about diversity and how to manage diversity and respect diversity, while at the same time we have to make sure that we don't make the mistakes that other countries have made. For example, assimilation or multiculturalism, because both of those have failed fairly spectacularly. There has to be respect for each other's traditions and values.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is just it has to work.
It's both ways,
yes.
Both ways. Yes.
So there has to be some sort of, because what I'm getting also, like what you hear from people in the public debate, it's always is the temporary labor force. And if you ask an Irish person, what do you think about the Polish people? You usually hear, oh yeah, they are great, they are hard workers. Not good colleagues, not good friends, not people who I like. I like them because they are hard workers. So that's just shows.
That's probably Irish employers comparing people with lazy Irish people. But on a more serious note, yeah, I think that perhaps reflects the age cohort of people who are here, who are mainly between 18 and 44, mainly single. That's the reality of what the migration has taken place. And I'm not altogether surprised to hear what you're saying, because there's a study has been published today by the OECD on integration, and that talks about where people get their first jobs, which is usually at a level lower than their qualifications, and that's the international experience. And in other words, I suppose what I'm saying is the migration that's happening isn't really that much different to the Irish experience of migration. And we have to learn something from that about the mistakes that happened with Irish migration to the UK in particular, where we now have to see the social consequences of something of what happened to people there. And we have to try and break down those barriers. And that's why I'm putting the emphasis on integration and involvement with the civic life, political life, cultural life, sporting life of Ireland. And we have to try and encourage that and get the organisations to go out there and do it. Okay.
I don't think there's any difficulty in integrating with the Irish people here in Ireland, you know. It's a two-way traffic, really. You have to sort of go forward to the Irish people and they come forward to you. You see. They're very easygoing. My experiences for the last 50 years is, if you want to find friends among the Irish, socially, professionally, or whatever it is, it's very easy. You know. The difficulties are very often from the Polish side, really, because they come here as guests. They're not familiar with the environment. They don't speak the language, they have to speak badly. They don't drink the same places that the Irish drink in the pubs. I know in the west of Ireland, there's a large Polish community around Kilrush, Kilkeen, those areas. They're working in the Monopoint plant, electric plant, you see. And the local Irish people, I go there occasionally and I talk to them. They say they're very nice. Of course, they work hard, they're very good, very reliable, but they're strange. Because the only way you know Polish people is you don't talk. If you watch the street, you come out of the supermarket and they have a bag with drinks and they go home and drink at home. Yeah. We drink in pubs. So you really have to go forward, you see, to meet them. Social, I think, is a mutual effort. Mm-hmm. But I think what the Irish authorities could help, it was mentioned here once or twice now, funding. You can't help yourself. Self-help is not always possible. People come here, their main interest is to earn some money to sustain themselves, maybe save something, you see. But they have the need to learn English. For that they have to pay. There's the general idea that if you have a program, what you want to do, a project or something, there's money available from the Department of Integration. But that's not enough. Nobody knows how to approach it for specific projects. You know, there's a possibility of a lot of startups in Ireland. There are a lot of educated young people, you know, who have ambitions and ability to start something commercially, you see, but they haven't got the capital. Irish people going to Poland, you see, have a lot of capitals, a lot of Irish people with very deep pockets, and they're very successful. A lot of Polish industries are in the hands of Irish people now. But the other way around, it doesn't work. They bring skills here, they bring abilities and willingness to work. But there's lacking something, you know, like capital and financial help. I think it was defined clearly for what projects the integration department will have funding, like the EU is defining their particular direction of their funding. It will help a lot of people. and they could start, there probably would be a better way to go forward.
Yeah, I think funding is obviously an issue. It's always a difficult issue, and participation by people in the community generally is also also raises difficulties. That's one of the reasons why, as well as the two kind of standing bodies, the Ministerial Council and the Expert Commission, the Minister has decided to establish a task force to look at what are the barriers to integration and to full participation in the civic, political, cultural, sporting and business life or entrepreneurial life of the country. Whether it might be maybe start-up grants or different arrangements, we just don't know. And we're not trying to say that we have all the answers. We're not going to say that we know this is the model that's going to work. That's why this task force, as well as the new structures, is being appointed to come up with a report within 12 months about the issues and what can be done about them. And the intention with that group is that, obviously they matter for themselves, but we'll be strongly urging them to hold public meetings right around the country and publicise them well in advance to get people from the migrant communities to go to those meetings and to say to that group what their problems are and what they see, what they would want to see done. And then that group can assess that and come back to us with a report. That group will be representative of people who have, of both migrants and Irish people, who have made a success in their profession or in their business. And that's the intention behind that group. The question of funding from the Office of the Minister of Integration, we see funding as coming from the mainstream areas. There is a lot of money out there in the dormant funds account, in the community and social partnership accounts that comes out, and some of it, I could give you the percentage, I don't actually have the percentages here, but in some of those particular funds, 11 to 12% of it has been given to groups who work with migrants. So there is money there. The question is, does everyone know how to access it? I would say not. I mean, that's an issue that we have to address as well.
I would like to refer to the girl from Trinity and the young Hans because there are very contradictory, very different views, which shows like how different mentalities are. There is something very tricky about stereotypes. We say so much about being so similar, Poles and Irish. We're not. I was here 11 years ago. I went for the cultural shock. I was supposed to be a year. After half a year, I left. I couldn't make it. And the thing about communication, my personal experience is I feel like Irish are open superficially, but it takes a long time to get accustomed with people. And that's historical background. 8 centuries they had to hide feelings and so on. So basically, and we were open. I think I was perceived as a rough person 11 years ago because I was saying what I think, which was so unusual. It just happened like from Gdańsk. We were specific. We were very straightforward. That was something that Irish couldn't get at the beginning. They thought this is being rough or something. So there are issues about it as well. Yes, we both eat loads of potatoes. Yes, we both drink, but different way. Again, the stereotype that both drink more, absolutely not. We drink differently, and we drink indoor, not outdoor. It's not that we don't want to integrate. It's the cultural issue. And there's a very important issue to raise awareness in Irish society about diversity of different minorities, because our cultures, the same with me. I try to understand different cultures. Sometimes my first perception might be not positive, but then if I talk to people, I try to understand, I know this is coming from different background, that's why. So it's very tricky, and I listen, and I've heard so many times how similar we are. We're not that much. We are similar in some ways, but we have to be aware of the differences and to be tolerant with it, both of us. Because as she said, and she's right, and we talk about it for 2-3 years now, that integration is two-way process. And I think we were more towards integration for a long time, not only folks, other minorities, and Irish were kind of, okay, fine, smart, but there was nothing afterwards. And I know this is as I said, the main explanation for me would be a historical background. I said it many times in public. This country was flooded by foreigners many times, but mainly to wreck the country, to cut the forests, to murder the people, to take over the land. Last 15 years, you had foreigners to build this country. There's a huge difference, and it was never said aloud to public, Irish public, and people just don't know. So that's it.
Well, I think an awareness raising campaign, the work of the task force is intended to be part of that. I mean, if it holds...
2008, you see.
Well, we hope to get it going before that.
Yeah.
Well, it is, yeah. we would hope that it would hold public meetings around the country to raise awareness about the issue and to explain what happens. But they just on the business thing, Enterprise Ireland, they were with me last week, and they will be starting a pilot project to encourage migrants to become involved in business activities starting in the autumn. And they're having some research done by somebody in UCD, I think, to see what they might do and how they will have to adapt their programs to accommodate people from the migrant community, because they have already established that it takes longer for a migrant to do set up your own business course or business startup course than for native Irish, because it's a whole different system.
Okay, this lady here. And
Good evening, my name is Aga Krause. I'm representing Polish podcast about Polish community in Ireland. And first of all, I would like to ensure you that we are, as a Polish community, are not pretty princess waiting in a tower for being rescued, because it might sound sometimes here like this. So we are definitely not like that. And I would like to say that I actually see loads of things from Irish side in terms of integration, in terms of legislation, and in terms of social life, and definitely more than from Polish side, actually. In terms of culture, for instance, beautiful exhibition in National Gallery of Ireland, Polish art, Polish painting exhibition. So that was brilliant success. So there is loads and loads of things in terms of integration from Irish side, and from Polish side, not really actually. But it's not a point. That was my statement, and I wanted to make it very, very clear. My question actually is, would you like to see any way of communication, and maybe think as well about other communities in here, not only about Polish, because we are very, very focused about Polish community, but it's not only one community in here, which is a huge community. And I think that we are part of something a little bit bigger. There's not a problem between Polish and Irish. It's a problem in terms of multicultural, like we actually react for different communities as well. So my question is, do you see any way of communication with different communities? For example, if you would like to announce something to the public, how you would do that? What type of media would you use?
Well, first of all, on the two communities, and I mentioned earlier multiculturalism and assimilation and so on, the UK authorities went down a multicultural route, which led to the recognition and funding of national-based organisations, including Irish ones in Camden and in various parts of the UK. They've now stopped doing that, and they say if there's going to be one youth, it's going to be a youth club in an area, there's only going to be one. There isn't going to be an Irish one, an English one, a Pakistani one, an Indian one, or a Jamaican one. There's going to be one. In that sense, the communities will have to mix more, because there won't be duplication. Ironically, that's causing difficulty for the ageing Irish population in the UK, because the local authorities there have said, no, we're not going to fund your Irish club anymore. So there's an upside and a downside to these things and policy approaches. But your final question was about making announcements.
No, actually, how we can make this cooperation, like how we can make the communication between us, what we as a Polish, as a part of something bigger, do for you to make you easier the communication with us, because sometimes there are loads of things in terms of legislation, for instance, which we don't know about even. So how you would see that cooperation, which should be, of course, from both sides, not only from you, like as well from our side.
Yeah, well I go back again to this Ministerial Council and this expert commission. I mean, the phenomenon of that we've experienced has happened so quickly that the structures that were there and that are still there are not adequate to deal with the issue. We need new structures for consultation and information and finding out what are the issues that people want dealt with. Because the NCCRI was established in 1991, and it was fine for those conditions at that time. It did provide a forum for interaction between the government agencies and the then migrant community. But the whole thing has changed, and we are trying to change to try to get direct contact between a minister and a ministry with migrants as to what are the issues. And we're trying. We're still very small, and as I did say at the outset, we have to really admit that our structures are not up to, or to use the in word, not fit for purpose, and they have to be changed. We have to have new ones, a new approach.
Okay, can we just one more question?
My name is Emiliana Kalewska. I work now for a Polish website for immigrants here. It's called MeToo.ie. I used to work for a website, .com, which was in 8 languages. So I had experience working with Polish people, but also with Irish people as well. So how I see integration, how it should happen, is actually through workplace as well. Of course, as you said, actually, my husband is Irish as well. So that's the aspect that you mentioned before, that integration happens through just getting to know people and settling down. But I think the workplace is very important as well. I'm still a friend of Irish people who I worked with in my previous jobs. So the obstacle that I can see at the moment is that because many Polish people work here in below their qualification in shops, in delis, restaurants, or on building sites, very often they work with other Polish people. So they don't really have chances because they ask their friends or their families to join them. It's kind of, they have their own networks. So they're surrounded by Polish people, and they don't have, they're not challenged by working in multicultural working environment, like, I don't know, NCCRI, where you have people from all sorts of countries. So I think that the point is just to encourage people to just get better jobs and just learn language and get jobs according to your qualification and work, just get into mainstream.
Who should
Yeah,
challenge?
excuse
me, who should challenge them? Can I?
Ourselves.
Sorry, can I just say a few words?
Okay.
I think that this is actually on our side, that we should learn language and then we can find we can find better jobs and we can make friends. It's just not all on the Irish side, I think. People, like Polish people, forget that they are the ones who have to make an effort, as well. Yeah, exactly. But I just think that Irish people make efforts all the time, and we stay with Polish people, we spend time with Polish people, we work with Polish people, and we don't make an effort. So I think that's important as well. And also, I'd like to say that I don't agree that it's not possible to make friends with Irish people because it is. It definitely is.
And it's not that difficult.
And it's not that difficult. You have to make an effort.
Yeah. Just very briefly, very brief response. Yes, there are rights and responsibilities. People who come here have rights to have services available, to be treated properly, not to be exploited, no discrimination, and legislation in place to deal with that. But it also brings responsibilities to, in a sense, I suppose, find out something about the country that people have come to, about the people who live there, and so on. It has also been said that learning a language is a key to integration, and having employment is a key to integration. The people from the EU who come here, by and large, are in employment. So in a sense that condition is met. People then say, and we're doing it ourselves in the Immigration and Residence Bill, that for third country nationals who need a residence permit, that they will have to demonstrate that they're making some effort to learn English. And we will also have a similar type requirement introduced into our citizenship laws. And that's what's the term they use for that? Leverage, that people are encouraged or incentivized to learn the language. But for people from the EU, there is no incentive of that kind to learn the language, because you don't need residence permits, or they're automatic, and you're EU citizens, so whether you carry an Irish passport or a Polish passport doesn't really make a great deal of difference. So there are changes taking place. The extent of the change that is taking place within Europe is something that, if you like, traditional approaches don't actually capture. So that's one of the challenges we have to face. Is, as I said earlier, we would like to make English. This group will be reporting on the provision of English language teaching, but this is one of the problems that we've hit against, and I'm sure the people in this room would be exceptions in that they would be committed. If classes were available to learn English, they would turn up. But how many others would turn up after a day's work, as I say, to take out their English grammar book and start we're just not sure, and that's one of the challenges for us. But I do agree fully with you, and the paper that we're publishing in about a few weeks' time will emphasise that there are rights and responsibilities, and people are entitled to have their rights respected, and that people have a responsibility to try to fit into society and get on with people. And it's a question of the title of the paper, I think it's a working title at the moment, is Managing Diversity in a Migration Nation, something like that.
Eileen, do you want to make a final point?
No, I just wanted to support the views to Fred who just said this, because I have been living here for 30 years.